Morning, everybody. How are we doing today? It is a Wednesday morning. I've been a little under the weather the last few days, bit of a chest cold. My kids seem to have brought that home from school. Schools are just a pit of germs, from what I understand. Feeling much better today. Got most of it cleared out. A couple nights ago was a little bit rough, but this is morning music right here. Just perfect. This is the great Cohn, and Cohn to me really channels a lot of Lester Young, Prez, and he also has a lot of Ben Webster and some Dexter Gordon. Like he definitely plays up-tempo stuff with the best of Cohn, but Cohn playing a ballad is wonderful. I played Cohn's Tones on Savoy the other morning and enjoyed that. It's a bit of an earlier session that they released on LP in probably '56 on Savoy. It's a good record, but this to me is one of my favorite Cohn records right here. This is on the Dawn label, and I was in Chicago, must have been 4 or 5 years ago now, and looking for this record, and I walked into the Reckless Records on Milwaukee Avenue, and they had one on the wall. I was like, oh sweet, there was actually a reissue. They just someone just reissued it. But I dug a little deeper and I found an original in the section, and I was like, oh, I'll put this reissue back, thank you very much. The prices weren't very different, honestly. I think I got this for $29.99, I think is what I paid for it. I had Reckless Records. I love Reckless, it's a great store. There's 3 branches of it in Chicago. But like early, great graphics, first of all. The Dawn label is a very underappreciated little label. They were a subsidiary of Seco, which is a pop label, bubblegum stuff. And they released this Dawn imprint for about 28, 29 titles. And not all of that is jazz. And in the late part of the 20 sequence, there's a lot of compilations. They're just kind of culling stuff from those first 20 records and repackaging in different formats. I like, especially the first 20. The compilations are great places to start. And the compilations are actually the ones you can find cheaper sometimes, although I've seen them up to $100, which is kind of crazy for a compilation, but the covers are almost always great. I'll do a little episode on Dawn coming up because I haven't talked about Dawn much lately. I did an episode probably a year and a half ago, but that's a long time. So Cohn on the Dawn label, Zoot Sims stuff on the Dawn label, and the jazz modes as well with Charlie Rouse and Julius Watkins. Those are all outstanding. Paul Kinish's record on Dawn. Dawn's a great little label with a great little imprint, and they had a huge East Coast sound. And they're kind of in that same vein as Bethlehem. Their stuff tends to lean more towards the white cats, college kids, which was probably a bit of a better way to make money than recording the black musicians, which obviously had a much smaller following and a much smaller distribution. The Dawn records are out there, but they're getting tougher to find. And let me just say this, there's only 20, 24 titles. When you see a Dawn record, it's good. They really are. They're great stuff. It's worth grabbing it and pick that stuff up and dig right into it. And it's a very foggy morning here. And I was going to show you something here. You can barely see one block right now in this small little town. I'm going to move my camera over here for this part. So, Cohn, if you're not a fan or if you're not familiar with him, you should definitely check him out. You know, he was married to Marilyn Moore, who was a great little singer, did the lounge scene for quite a while, and her record on Bethlehem is also one of my favorite records. She channels Billie Holiday really well, and they're really good friends. I've talked about that record quite a bit, I think. But what I want to talk about now is an interesting thing. They're one of the greatest groups of all time, the Jazz Messengers, has what's kind of a lost year, which is strange to say about one of the biggest groups in today's jazz consumer's mindset. But again, this speaks to how certain labels are getting promoted, other labels are getting ignored. Columbia still has that big, strong legacy which sells their stuff. Blue Note is very well established in the minds of today's collectors, and you know, it's Blue Note's everywhere. You know, you don't have to even be a jazz fan to be aware of what Blue Note is. But the Jazz Messengers have numerous iterations. You know, Clifford Brown's a member with Lou Donaldson early on. There's some live stuff that happens at Blue Note Cafe Bohemia. They make that first record on Columbia right here, 1956. And this still has Horace Silver, Doug Watkins, Hank Mobley, and Donald Byrd with Blakey. What a great group that is. It's a very serious record. And it's really one of the first real risky chances any of the major U.S. labels took on this new aggressive black hard bop sound. So kudos to Columbia for taking that risk. This was equivalent of the Wu-Tang back in 1956. This is pretty edgy stuff. There's a militancy. It's not a bunch of smiling pictures of, you know, Nat Cole and a woman. It's these are agitated black men. And Columbia's like, it's time. Let's do this. And they followed up the next year with a second record, which is also fairly well known, but not as well known as this one. And the lineup changes between these two. Horace Silver leaves, takes Mobley and Watkins with him, and they make a few records together, and then those guys all go off to their own careers, and Watkins passes away pretty quickly. Watkins, one of the great bass players we kind of forget about a lot. But Blakey wasn't he was undeterred. He's almost going to hire new guys, and he brings in Bill Hardman, a fantastic trumpet player, I think from Detroit. Jackie McLean, one of the soon-to-be Blue Note legends. Sam Dockery on the piano, and Spanky DeBrest on the bass. And a little sidebar here, making my trading cards. Two of the hardest people to find any photographs of were Sam Dockery and Spanky DeBrest. And you would think, being Jazz Messenger pedigree and affiliated with that legacy, that there would have been more photos taken of you, especially as many records as you guys made together in this short window. But one of the few pictures I found of Sam Dockery, it's his back playing the piano. I'll show it to you when I pull it up here. I think I had to pull Spanky DeBrest's photo off one of these records, and I think I found a later picture of Sam Dockery, which wasn't really what I wanted to have, but I couldn't. Some of these guys are so hard to find pictures of. It's crazy, and it just goes to show you how much these guys weren't stars at that time. You know, and one of the things about the Blue Note roster that makes it special is when you got the Blue Note, Frank Wolf was going to take photos of you. And so a guy like Tina Brooks, even Hank Mobley, there's a lot of photos of you because you were there at the Blue Note studio with Frank Wolf snapping away. And that didn't happen in most of the labels. And so prominent bands like this, some of the members remained pretty anonymous. DeBrest was a fantastic bass player, and Sam Dockery's a great piano player, both very forgotten guys. So this second lineup happens early 57. Hardman, McLean, Dockery, and DeBrest with Blakey. And there's a bit of a tonality shift here between these two, but it's still Jazz Messenger stuff. It's still powerful. So now they enter this kind of obscure year. And it's a weird thing because we're talking about the Jazz Messengers. We're talking about some pretty big names here. And again, the band churns out some pretty impressive members in this time, including Jackie McLean, including Johnny Griffin. And yet, the legacy of the Jazz Messengers in 1957 is very, very obscure. It's almost an entire year that was lost. And it's not lost for having them not worked hard, because it's one of the hardest working years of any guy in jazz ever. Coltrane in 65 is a bit like Blakey here in 1957. He's working his butt off. And by 58, he's ready to go back to Blue Note, and they do another live recording at Blue Note, and then eventually Moanin' comes out 59-60, and then history records and documents the rest of that Blue Note, our Blakey Jazz Messenger stretch. It's interrupted briefly by a few records at Riverside, but he comes back to Blue Note again after that. So 57 is this weird year where none of these records are going to be that familiar to you compared to the Blue Note stuff. They're all going to be like, that's a Jazz Messenger record? And they're all pretty hard to come by. You know, I'm guessing none of them sold particularly well, which isn't that shocking. This was hard bop in 1957, and it wasn't safe. It was dangerous. So let's just dive right in here. In January of 57, they end up on the West Coast somehow, By somehow, I mean probably by train, maybe by plane. And Hardman goes in the studio, Bill Hardman, with Jackie McLean, Spanky DeBrest, and Sam Dockery, and they recorded this great record for Pacific Records called Ritual. And it's on the 400 series, which is a weird little sequence at Pacific. They run 1200 series from 55, 56, 57, and then for some reason at 57 they start a second sequence at 400. They do like 12 titles and they abandon it and move on to the PJ1. Don't really know why, but so it's on that 400 series, 402. And the second side of this, if I recall, is a bit of a drum piece, percussion piece. And I think it's 3 tracks though. But there's also, I think, a guest percussionist on this one, maybe. I know there's on a couple of these, but this is great stuff. And it's not that expensive, it's out there, and it's part of that lost year for the Messengers. And then following up in February, March, is this great record, Tough, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, which isn't released until 66 on Cadet. But it's recorded for Argo, and for whatever reason, it doesn't come out right away. Again, it's Jackie McLean, Bill Hardman, Sam Dockery, and Spanky DeBrest. So that's the third record they make here, 57. That Columbia one, the Pacific one, this Cadet one. In March of 57, they do this live session for Elektra. It's a midnight session with the Jazz Messengers. Great quality live recording on the Elektra label, which is a really tough label to find. And it's got to turn into the same Elektra that signs the Doors in 66, 67. You know, it's got to be that same Elektra. But for some reason, their jazz imprint is very small. And a lot of the jazz stuff ends up showing up at Savoy shortly after. Like they sold their jazz titles off to Savoy. Some Herbie Mann stuff, those New York jazz quartet records, those come out on Savoy with different covers and different names. This comes out on Savoy as well. As 59, I think they released this on Savoy. So these are the same record. This is the Savoy imprint, and that's the original Elektra. This is the one that I got the photo of Spanky DeBrest from, right there. And it's not a great clear photo for the card, but it's what I could find. And then that picture of Sam Dockery right there, that's the back of his head. That's the picture of Sam Dockery I can find from this era. The back of the man's head. So again, this is from March of 57. And then moving along, again in March of 57, on the Vic label, which is affiliated with RCA, comes the music of Lerner and Lowe. And My Fair Lady, Brigadoon, Paint Your Wagon. And enter Johnny Griffin now on this one, in place of Jackie McLean. But you still got Hardman, Dockery, and DeBrest, along with Blakey. I actually like that cover quite a lot. It's kind of fun, them peeking through the curtain. I thought about taking that picture of Spanky DeBrest or Sam Dockery, but again, just a small head. It would have looked funny. And then shortly after that, in probably April of 57, they do A Night in Tunisia on Vic, RCA. And that's not to be confused with the Blue Note version of A Night in Tunisia, 1961. Different record, completely. Different lineup, completely. Different versions of those songs because the linup's different, and that's what jazz is. I can reinterpret this any way I want, and my band members are going to help me do it differently every time I do it, especially when my band members are different. But this is a great little record. I want to get original of this sometime. This is kind of a 90s reissue pressing of it. It sounds fine, but I'd still like to get a heavier. I just love the old feeling of the old covers and the smell of them. And then in May of 57, they end up at Jubilee Records. Another New York label, Herb Abramson, who was with Atlantic, left. He starts Jubilee. He's kind of trying to find his way. He's got some comedy stuff on one number sequence. He's got some decent jazz titles on this other sequence. And right around the time this comes out, 1049, in the 1000 sequence for Jubilee, there's a stretch of about 25 records that are awesome, including some Donald Byrd, Gigi Grice, some Charlie Mingus, Hampton Hawes. There's some really solid Jackie McLean titles. Jubilee has some great stuff in a really small window. That Tubby Hayes record, not Tubby Hayes, Ray Draper, just fantastic stuff. This is a great record. I think this one has also percussion on the second side. all these records, not all of them, but a couple of these records break down to kind of percussion parts, add parts. And then this comes out in May of 57. I don't think it comes out in May, but it's recorded in May of 57. And this is him returning a favor when he played with Monk on some of Monk's early recordings. He's now having Monk come in with him. And so in 57 May, along with Hardman, Johnny Griffin, and Spanky DeBrest, they recorded this record with Thelonious Monk. So Sam Dockery has to sit this one out. And it was, like I said, it was a kind of a favor being returned. And this is a great session. All in 1957. We're still only in May. That's one of the most prominent records of this era, in part because it's on Atlantic. So people kind of know that one. And then he goes to Bethlehem, and this is in August of 57. Out of This World and The Next World 2, Hard Drive. And what a great album cover that one is. And the lineup on this one is Blakey, Harmon, Johnny Griffin. Junior Mance plays piano on some of it, Spanky DeBrest, and Sam Dockery. So Junior Mance sits in on a couple tracks. But again, it's pretty much that same hidden jazz lineup from this era that's just so obscure. What a great album cover. This one received another album cover right around that same period. Why they have two covers for it, I'm not sure. I think this one's pretty great, although this one's not that bad either. And then they follow that up in the late 57, early 58 with Art Blakey and his big band. And this has a huge amount of people in: Melba Liston, Frank Rehak, Jimmy Cleveland, Donald Byrd, Idris Suleiman, Hardman, Ray Copeland, Wilbur Marshall, Walter Bishop, Sahib Shihab, Bill Graham, Coltrane, Al Cohn. It's just a pretty amazing ensemble. And it shows you that all these eras of jazz are so interwoven. And they can take all these guys from the hard bop era and make them kind of a big band piece with some hard bop mixed in. A pretty rare piece. This one also has a second cover that's red with black and white photos. That's not too different than this one. So this stretch of band, this lineup that they're doing here, it's a great group that really goes unheralded, exists under the surface and people don't really know it or remember it. And it's a pretty crazy documentation of a year in a guy's life. We'll go backwards again, just look through all this. 2 records on Bethlehem, a record with Monk on Atlantic, Jubilee, 2 records on Vic, this live record on Elektra with its Savoy counterpart, the Cadet Argo session, the Pacific Record session, and then this Columbia session. That second kind of official Messenger lineup is really the most underrated, underappreciated, and unknown of the Jazz Messenger lineups. And Griffin, of course, goes on to big things at Blue Note and eventually at Riverside and with Lockjaw Davis. Griffin's one of the great players of the late 50s, early 60s. McLean goes on to a great acclaim as well. Dockery and DeBrest seem to slip into kind of obscurity for some reason. I don't know how much they both show up after this at all, to be honest. But I think Dockery plays until his later years. Probably just around the Philadelphia area, if I remember. But the Jazz Messengers are such a great institution. One of the great fundamental pillars of what jazz stands on in the 50s and 60s. And it's just weird that there's this whole era that's so obscure, and it's almost 100% because of the labels that they're on. If these were on Blue Note, we'd see these all the time. The quality's still there, the musicianship's still there, the aggressiveness is still there. You've got guys like Griffin and McLean who are highly acclaimed players. You think that would be enough to elevate these records into the average collector's landscape. Yet Griffin, Blakey, McLean, it doesn't seem to matter. It's not on Blue Note. It's not on Impulse. It's not on Columbia. And so there's no marketing behind these records now. So take some guy like me going, hey, these are good records too. And And then, of course, in 58, he does some more live stuff for Blue Note, and then he gets re-signed with Blue Note, and Bob's your uncle, as they say. Although I never really understood that saying, Bob's your uncle. But, Moaning comes out, and then he goes into that 60s era with Jamie Merritt, Bobby Timmons, Wayne Shorter, just, Lee Morgan, Curtis Fuller comes in and out. Just an incredible lineup. And that lineup continues to change through the 60s as well, into the 70s and the 80s, and probably into the 90s even, if I remember. It's just an incredible body of work that Mr. Blakey is responsible for. So I just wanted to show you that missing year, that forgotten Jazz Messenger legacy right there. It's an interesting little anomaly, and as famous and as recognized as most of his other albums are, these are all fairly forgotten, and it's just crazy that he did that much work in what's considered a forgotten lost year for him. As forgotten and as lost as it might seem, they certainly seem to have a trajectory of their own when they were doing it. They did a lot of work. And Blakey's one of the hardest working guys in this business. He really was. And his job as a band leader and as a talent scout is one of the most underappreciated aspects of what Blakey's about. A guy like Miles Davis poached great talent from other great jazz bands, like the Jazz Messengers. Blakey is taking his talent from the high schools and the small town bands, and Blakey's really digging deep for the roots, trying to find this talent to bring into the Messengers to help push along this fantastic music from this era. So I'm going to leave it at that for today. Hidden Messenger stuff, the great Al Cohn, something on the trading cards. I have the fronts done for $683. There's going to be 10 more made, but I'm not making them yet because I want to see who I forgot. I don't want to make them like, I need to add him. So I'm going to finish the backs, and I have to re-edit the fronts of a bunch of them to make them print properly. And so if we're going to do what I suggested on Patreon the other day and have it be available for people to purchase as a set, I need to finish all of them before I start releasing them. And so it's going to take me a little while to get all those backs written up, all those bios. And like I said, it's a labor of love. I've been out of it the last couple of days, didn't get much done. I'm going to dive back into it today, start getting some more done. So it's going to be, when all said is done, it's a selection of 693 cards. And they're going to have some pretty cool features on them, including telling you what big bands these guys were playing with, so you know their roots, where they're coming from, what their career spanned, where their geography, just a lot of different things are going to be on these cards. And obviously I'll probably still make them available to download as well. But and then what I'm planning on doing is once this first set of 693 is done, it's probably going to be at least a month before I get all the backs done, just to be honest. Excuse me. But once I get this first set done in public, out there, what I'm going to do is create another set of 99 to add to this set of the people that we forgot that should have been on this first set, which is going to bring it up to 792. And I'm kind of doing this in sets of 99 because it has 9 cards per page, so 11 pages makes 99 cards in those trading card books. So we're doing them in sets of 99. So the first 11 sets of 99 gets us to 693, and then the next set will get us to 892. And then there's going to be 212 cards left there to make 1,000, where I'm going to do the Legends of the Modern Era, and that's from 1970 maybe to the present. I don't really know a lot about the present guys. I know a few of them. I'll obviously talk to Ken McAuliffe and a few of my friends, get some input from some of them. But so there's going to be that set as well of the current players added on down the road. And then there's also going to be a set of 99 of the writers, producers, and label owners, the business aspect side of this thing. I think a lot of those names are important to know. And then there's a lot of different ways that we can go with these cards after that. So I got some fun things in store. So keep that all in mind. I appreciate you all. Y'all stay safe. If you want to go to the merchandise store and get some Jazz Shepherd merchandise, that's always appreciated. I'm trying to track down this DJ job in the cities with an old friend of mine, and he's got his hands full running the restaurant right now. He's not for me, daily you want an update what's going on. When you're at a restaurant thinking about the DJ you want to hire, something you might think about once a week because you got so much shit going on. So I'm just kind of trying to be patient with it. Hopefully he'll get back to me soon. He did give me New Year's Eve, which is at least I'll be working then. But always appreciate everybody. Go to that Patreon page and pledge a little bit of money to help support the channel and my family. It's always appreciated. I love you all. I enjoy making that episode with Cannons, of course. It's always fun. We'll talk to you all soon. Peace.